morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to each and every one of you. Yesterday, Helen Zille was announced as the mayor or potential mayor for DA if the DA were to win the Johannesburg election. Joburg, not in a good spot. The ANC has effectively destroyed the province of Gauteng, but Joburg in specifically has been run into the ground. After the announcement, Helen Zille went on to 94.7, the radio station, where she was supposed to talk about the plans that the DA have becoming the new mayors of Joburg. But what she walked into instead was a very fiery Anele, who really didn't have any interest in hearing what Helen Zille was planning or what Helen Zille wanted to achieve, but instead had a very political statement that she wanted to bring across, and she was not going to let Helen Zille stand in her way. It starts with one of the most loaded questions you'll ever hear in your life. Just listen to this.
When world class doesn't begin to describe how well those areas are run, but there's some that aren't, right? And Cape Town works well because there's segregation, and that's why it's easy to run it like that.
She literally leads off with this. Now, Helen Zille does push back and say, wait, what the hell are you talking about? Segregation in Cape Town? Are you for real? I live in Cape Town, guys. We have townships literally spread in the middle of everything else. It's actually one of the things that me and my brother find very amusing. Where I live, for example, so literally the neighborhood that I live in, one neighborhood over, there's a township. One neighborhood up, so there's my neighborhood, another neighborhood, and then another township right on top of that, right? So a neighborhood here, my neighborhood, this neighborhood, and then a township here. Then another neighborhood, then another township, literally spread in between all of these places are townships, and it's everywhere, right? So the idea that Cape Town is segregated, there are areas, and of course this is what she's mostly referring to, is those very, very bad areas like Khayelitsha, as well as the Cape Flats, these areas that are very much run down. And yes, they are very segregated, but they're also historical areas, right? So they've existed for a long time, and they're by nature not that integrated into the rest of Cape Town. But to call Cape Town segregated is insane. And of course, the point that Anele is trying to bring across here is that the DA only caters to white people. It doesn't care about anyone else. And Helen Zille does actually push back phenomenally well and does ask Anele, name a single neighborhood in the Western Cape, a single township that doesn't have access to water, sewage, refuse removal. At some point, Anele brings up, because this is pretty much all the DA can offer, right? Because I think a lot of people are confused about what exactly is the role of government, and it's actually brought up in this interview.
You know, Anele and I were having this discussion, Helen, because you know what happens, and to the point of the discussion you guys were having, it's impossible for us as residents to draw distinctions between what is the municipality, what is local government, what is provincial government, and what is...
He makes a good point, right? And this is something that I sort of blame Anele for, because Anele immediately shoots back when Helen Zille names all of these water, refuge, and sewage, which is pretty much the only thing that local government can give to you. Anele goes, what about safety? These neighborhoods are very unsafe. Well, that's police. And police is national government. In fact, this is one of the fights that the DA has been involved in for almost, I think, 3 years now, because they're trying to get the courts to force the national government to relegate the powers of policing to the local governments so that local governments can actually tackle the problems in their local areas. Because as it turns out, when you have crime in one area and crime in another, fighting that crime isn't always the same. For example, fighting murder is not going to be the same as fighting hijackings. You're going to need different types of policing and police specialities there. So they're trying to solve that. But of course, Anele knows this. But it's a nice way to get that gap in, just to hit that home at least as much as possible.
Cape Town is a great example of a well-run.
So that is
what about Tshwane and what about
do.
Nelson Mandela Bay? Are there?
Anele then does the one thing that, and I hate doing this because it sounds like I'm cheerleading for the DA, which of course I'm not. I don't like cheerleading for any political party, But I do like fairness. And I do like, when I criticize the DA, I always try to be fair and honest and truthful. When I criticize the ANC, I try to do the exact same. And I hate when people sort of make up or merge lines and blur things in order to criticize just because it suits their specific political ideology. But listen to this next question from Anele, because this is something that has driven me to insanity in our country.
Almost 50%.
Cape Town is a great example
Yes.
of a well-run.
So that is
what
what
about
a local
Tshwane
government
and
has
what
to
about
do.
Nelson Mandela Bay? Are they as well run as Cape Town?
Of course not, because it hasn't had the DA government for 20 years.
This question is moronic and stupid on the face of it. And it's something that I despise from Action SA. It's something that I despise from people who just blindly hate the DA. Look, guys, I think that we should hold governments to account. And no government should be above accountability. No government should be above criticism. But we have to be fair in our criticism. So, for example, when you say that the DA didn't fix Nelson Mandela Bay, and of course, Anele's argument here would be Nelson Mandela Bay has far too many black people, and so the DA just doesn't care, because that's the entire interview is just her trying to make racial arguments of everything. But effectively, the DA was in coalition when they had Nelson Mandela Bay. In Tshwane, they were in coalition as well. And if you remember back to the time that the DA was running Tshwane, almost every single month, you would have a new fight between the DA and one of their coalition partners, because one of their coalition partners were threatening to move to the ANC if the DA didn't give them this portfolio or that portfolio. This is the truth of sadly coalition governments in South Africa, because there are so many political parties that are mostly just interested in stealing from the public. When they get into government and you make an arrangement with them to get into government because you want to keep out the ANC, you ultimately just end up with a bunch of crooks that aren't ANC members that still want to get their hands on the coffers of the public. And if you're not willing to give them the access, they'll just vote for the ANC because they know the ANC will give them that access. And so, yeah, I don't blame the DA for the failures of Tshwane. And I need to be honest about this. I don't even think local government fixes any of this, because even if you are in control of the province, and they do actually make this point later on in the interview, I think it's in this clip here. I'm not going to play it to you now, but they do make the point here that basically all local government can do is manage what national government has allowed it, right? It can't build really anything new. It can't do anything great. It can just sort of manage whatever national government has left for it.
Corruption under
Johannesburg.
me. I'd love to hear corruption
Yes,
under me.
but that's what I'm saying, that you are
Give
saying
me
that the
evidence.
reason that
Give me
Johannesburg
evidence.
is not run well is because that you're right, the money does disappear. We're not.
Then, of course, Anele goes on to say that the DA is corrupt. And she does make the point, or she does try to at least make the point that, well, okay, so you're saying, Helen Zille, and she literally does this. So you're saying, I've always said, anyone that starts a sentence by saying, let me be clear, will almost always lie immediately after that about everything they're saying. Or when someone says, so you're saying, they'll never say what you're actually saying. Right? So Helen Zille just went on here and she basically said, look, no one says the DA is perfect, but we are better than the ANC. And if you want perfect, you're dealing with humans, you're never getting perfect. Right? So that's just never going to happen. But what Helen Zille is saying is we do a better job than the ANC. This is Anele basically responding.
That the
Evidence.
reason that
Give me
Johannesburg
evidence.
is not run well is because that you're right, the money does disappear. We're not. That's something you and I both agree on. But I'm saying that there are allegations of corruption within the DA.
Examples?
So would you do
Examples?
Helen Zille asks multiple times, can you give me examples of corruption? And specifically what Helen Zille eventually clarifies is, give me examples of corruption where we didn't deal with that corruption, where the people who were accused of corruption weren't immediately suspended and ultimately fired from the DA if and when it was proven. Which, of course, you can't, because while I don't like the DA and a lot of things, I must admit they are less corrupt than the ANC. Their government, they're always going to be somewhat corrupt, but they're not quite. No one is as corrupt as the ANC, perhaps maybe the EFF. But outside of that, I don't think there's any other party that comes close to that level of corruption. So the DA in that regard is correct. But of course, Anele isn't looking for the truth. Anele is looking for the bombshell. She's looking for that angle that gets the next click, because she does, in the same interview, say that 94/7 is basically they are in control of the people. They speak for the people, and if Helen Zille wants to govern in Johannesburg, she's going to need 94.7. Because if she doesn't have 94/7, she's not going to have a way to speak to the people. And 94/7 will withhold access if Helen Zille doesn't play by their silly, silly rules. Finally, Anele ends with the ultimate race card.
Can you survive in the DA if you're racist?
Certainly not. We're the most non-racial party there is, and we are completely judging people on their value as human beings and not the color of their skin.
Because I think that'll be your biggest obstacle in getting to mayor. Once again, I led this conversation with the fact that you are very qualified to run and be mayor. I do not for a second doubt that. I just think that as a person who is living in Johannesburg, as a black person who lives in Johannesburg, black people struggle to see you wanting to forward them, right? That's what it comes across as.
Anele, when were you elected as the spokesperson of all black people?
And I must say, I have to give that to Helen Zille. Well said. There is no such thing. I am not the spokesperson for all white men, nor am I the spokesperson for all white people. I'm not the spokesperson for all people with blue eyes or people with blonde hair. I'm not the spokesperson for, well, actually, I am the spokesperson for all fat people. And on behalf of all fat people, you guys are allowed to make fun of us. But outside of that, right, so outside of my national or international spokespersonship of fat people, no one is the spokesperson for anyone. And the fact of the matter is that I hate to believe that the overwhelming majority of South Africans actually care about the race of people so much, right, that they would not support anyone. I would like to remind all of you that the DA had its highest voting share under Helen Zille, a white woman, right? And it was under Mmusi Maimane that the vote for the DA started to drop. And since we have the statistics, we know that the vote wasn't dropping from the side of white people. White DA supporters were still supporting the DA. It was dropping on the side of black DA supporters who weren't liking what Mmusi Maimane was putting forth. Because Mmusi Maimane, and it's not because he was black, it was because Mmusi Maimane started to play the race politics. He wanted to be sort of like the EFF light with all of the grievance politics baked in. Here's the truth, ladies and gentlemen. If you're black in this country, you stop with the grievance politics. It doesn't work. The only people that benefit from grievance politics are politicians who manage to sell you on this idea that you are a victim and that the only way for you to not be a victim is for them to save you. Of course, they're not interested in saving you. They're interested in lining their own pockets while you wait for them to give you something, anything, a little crumb of their tables. Because guess what? You're not being oppressed. You're not being oppressed by white people. You're not being held back by white people. You're being held back by your own mindset. If you believe that you are not good enough and therefore you must take from others in order to have, you will never have anything. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed my video, if you like what I do, please hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and leave a comment letting me know exactly what you thought of this interview with Helen Zille. As always, massive shout out and thank you to those who support this channel. To become a supporter, just the link in the description down below or the join button below this video. Your support is appreciated. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. A peace.